The Federal Reserve, facing down what they call cooling inflation, decides to drop the rate point hike to only 0.5% this time, sending people thinking that the economy is going to improve, but still actually rather leaving us into a point that we're suffering. So we'll talk about that, what that means for you and your finances and everything else, and where we go from here. In other news, 12 tornadoes are confirmed in North Texas, and the storm cell continues to move on through Louisiana, and Mississippi and Alabama are both under watches at this point, so we'll talk about that. What happened there? Throw some F's in the chat for the people who passed away, and look for charities to help clean up the mess. In further news, Brad Raffensperger calls on Georgia to end the runoff elections, and I'm actually kind of in support of this here, so we'll talk about that and where we go and what that means. And Joe Biden can't help himself, and he ties transgender laws into both racism and anti-Semitism, because of course he does. It is going to be all this and more. We are back. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Hearing the Stardew Valley soundtrack always makes me want to go play it again. I love that game, and I mean, we've seen it on things that I like before too. It is probably one of my favorites, and just even going through with the soundtrack remix from DJ Cutman and Coffee Date, it just I hear it and I want to go play it. I want to go get, because I've got it on PC. Obviously, you guys have watched me play it on stream before. But I also have it on mobile, and that's even a little bit more enjoyable too, because I can pick up. And not only, like, if I play on PC, you have to play to the end of the day and start from where you left off. Whereas on mobile, and they actually did tailor it for the mobile experience, which is not something that I usually say is a good thing very often, but for the Stardew Valley situation, it's a very good thing, because they give you the option to pick up right where you left off instead of going back to the start of the day. And yeah, I got almost to year 2. I think I got into year 2 the last playthrough that I did, but of course I would go back and start over again this time, especially with the infinite money trick that I found off of that too. It's just, even without doing any of that though, it's just an enjoyable game, and it really is. So hey, maybe I'll do that. No, I do have to get some of the rest of the stuff moved and put away yet tonight. So anyway, hi, good evening. My name is Jay Edgar. This is Contemporary, and we've got a fair amount of stuff to go over here again today. I mean, we haven't had the wall-to-wall 40-tab, 60-tab days anytime recently here, but we still have plenty of stuff to go over here. So we're going to go over it, and we'll talk about how some of this affects you. My goal ultimately is to bring you news from the common man for the common man, because I have had to make some of the same decisions that you have, and many of you have had to make some of the same decisions that I have. Maybe some of you haven't. I know that my friend Quest is quite blessed at that point, but that is what we have for that. So we'll go over this. We'll talk finance, we'll talk the interest rates, we will talk about Texas because, well, even though the friend that I have in Texas is down in South Texas, I do have a friend in Northern Texas too, and I actually probably need to reach out to her. For those of you who are on the Discord side, because I know that she's not on the Twitter side, if you do see Mrs. McLeod, do reach out to her, make sure she's okay, and say a prayer for her as well and her neighbors and compatriots. But with that, we're going to get down into the news. Before we do, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out, if you're on Twitter, Tweets by Brit, or go check out Overruled with KTZed if you're into a good bi-weekly true crime podcast. I was not able to get to the live stream of the last one. I was, but it was at the very tail end because I was moving, but I did go back and check it out after the fact, and I mean, it is good work, so go and check that out. And also check out PJ Patriot, the No Gimmicks podcast, and Mr. Behavior as well. We'll check out all of those great creators doing various different kinds of things, but bringing you news and culture from the common man for the common man. Daily Ignoramus, by the way, reminder, is starting earlier now, partially because I am not on the same time schedule that I was, and that was an agreement that he and I had together, is that we would, we changed our schedules around so we wouldn't interact with each other, because we do share audience here, and because now I have moved to an evening show, he can move to a morning show and get some more done throughout the rest of his day, so it works out well for him as well. I'm very happy to see the progress that he is making in building his channel back up again and getting close to the affiliated side over on Twitter, or Twitch rather, once again. So go check out all that great programming, and let's get down into the news. We will start today with finance. Starting with the Dow. Let's get the live chat up here so I can see what you guys are doing. All right, the Dow is at 33,966.35 at the close of trading today. And we had a steady rise throughout the day. It actually looked like it was going to come up and have a third day of winning streak here. But then we got the announcement that, yes, we are going to hike the rates one more time, and it fell off like a stone. However, it tried to build back, and it couldn't do it. There's no momentum. People are looking at this and the fact that they can't move unless they have a major life-changing event like I did. But even there, I came out and rented first until I can go find something appropriately priced with an appropriate interest rate as well. I am doing the temporary thing, living with at least keeping a roof over my head right now. There's really no opportunity to go out and improve yourself. There's no opportunity to go out and start that small business, although some people have done so not out of a desire to do so and pay the interest rates and taxes off it, but out of sheer necessity as well. So we've got a lot of things moving and shaking in the economy, and the Dow is reflecting it. And one thing to remember is that certainty fuels the Dow, and uncertainty is one of the things that causes it to drop. Like we saw today, 33,966.35 is the close, with that being down 142.29 or 0.42%. Looking in at Bitcoin, your Bitcoin is at 17,806.40. That also took a major jump after, well, not right after, but shortly after the news about the Fed rate hike. But then it dropped off and fell off a cliff after regular trading stop. Well, actually, no, that's not. No, that would be after regular trading stop. After regular trading on the major market stop, it did take another big dip. It tried to climb back and then dipped again. And now holding steady to 17,806.40. On the day, it has actually gained $33.30 US cents, or 0.19%. But I mean, we were looking at possibly cresting the 18.5 mark at one point earlier today, so it didn't get there. In fact, it fell back off again, and that's where we're basically flatline right now with the Dow. The Madison gas prices remain largely unchanged, although it does seem like there is a trend down right now. I know it looked like it was trending up yesterday. The quick trip in the far southwest side in Madison area is still at 290, but the other one on the far west side is down to 269 on the Isthmus. The Amoco has dropped to 278. Going into the Isthmus, we're still at 280. 280 going out of town. on the north side, 275 going out of town towards Token Creek on the other north side, and down going out of town on the far east side, the BP is at 289 and dropping a penny day over day. So a little bit of move, a little bit of shake, and probably a little bit of relief before the holidays as well, which don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It may be a little bitty itty bitty drop, but it'll help you get to your family and help you get a few things prepared before it all starts coming crashing and spiking, and that's what we see coming off of that. Let's see what IBD has to say for the morning. Dow closes lower, Fed decision, and Powell presser, solar energy stock breaks out. From Rachel Fox. The Dow closed lower after leading the upside early Wednesday. Stocks abruptly turned negative after the Federal Reserve's rate decision and Chair Jerome Powell's news conference. The Dow Industrial Average closed down 0.4% after pairing earlier losses of about 1%. The Nasdaq closed 0.8% lower after trading down 1.3%, the hardest hit index. The S&P 500 lost about 0.6%. Volume remained lower on the Nasdaq and on the New York Stock Exchange versus the close on Tuesday, according to early data. As expected, the Fed slowed the pace of its rate hike to a half point, targeting a range of 4.25 to 4.5%, but the Federal Reserve policymakers expect to hike their key interest rate to 5.1% next year, which was higher than Wall Street anticipated. This sent the indices down sharply. Before today's Fed announcements, the market was expecting policymakers to take another step down at the next Fed meeting, with the odds of a quarter-point hike in February 1st at 60%. That number fell to about 47% shortly after the Fed announcement. The Fed also expects the unemployment rate to rise to about 4.6% next year as growth slows to about 0.5%. This week, the market rally has ripped back and forth, but the indices are still coming out ahead despite today's losses. Wednesday's action is similar to Tuesday's, where investors initially saw gains in early trading, but the upside fizzled in the afternoon trading. The S&P has successfully held above the 39,000 level, a key area of support, but is now moving further away from its support at its 200-day moving average. Delta is higher after raising outlook. Delta rose more than 1.3% after raising its quarter 4 outlook and 2023 guidance. The Atlanta-based carrier cited strong demand for holiday travel, saying EPS could nearly double in 2023. And once again, we're looking at a point where a lot of the lockdowns are coming out that were still in effect as of Christmas last year. For the most part, we were out of the water, but there were still people who didn't want to travel because we've got the COVID fear. And a lot of that is gone right now, although they are trying to inject it back in, but that's what we see coming for that. Earnings reports are due later this week from software maker Adobe and home builder Lennar. Adobe is set to report after the market closes. Adobe shares are up over 2% so far this week, as analysts forecast earnings of about $3.50 per share on revenue of $4.53 billion. Meanwhile, Lennar shares are up close to 3% this week, ahead of its earnings due out after the close. Analysts expect $4.90 a share on sales of $10 billion. One of the nation's largest home builders, Lennar has been rallying since mid-October and is trading above its 50-day and 200-day moving averages. And again, I don't know how. With materials costs still being sky high, and who has the money to go back out and buy a plot of land and put a house on it right now? Especially when you're going to be paying X amount over 30 years. And one of the only things that I can think is a bit of speculation about the thing as well. And that's one of the things that I'm looking at. I mean, a lot of people right now are looking at me and saying, even if, because I am pre-approved right now, even if I find the house and the prices drop, not to go out and get the house, because, I mean, it's going to cost me more than a $400,000 house would have cost me year over year over the term of a 30-year mortgage if I buy right now. But one of the things to think about, and I mean, if you do have to move, if you can stay put and you already own, stay put. I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. If you can stay put, stay put. But if you're in an opportunity like I am, where I had to come back and move to go back and seek a better job and different hours and better opportunities for myself, if you are in that opportunity, and you do have to buy, or even rent for a little while. Grab something when you can get it and pay on it for a couple of years. As long as you can afford the interest rates as where they are right now, pay on it for a couple of years. And once the interest rates get back to near zero, which I do anticipate they're going to do in 2025 and more, go and refinance that. Especially, and again, the important part of that is if you can get the base mortgage rate as low, or I'm sorry, the base principal rate as low as possible. But that's what I see off of that, and that's where we go for that. Let's grab one from the Hill. And this is again going into the housing market. From Julia Mueller, what to watch in the housing market in 2023. Amid a housing market plagued by high mortgage rates, inflation woes, and recession fears, housing prices in the U.S. are expected to fall next year, though the market isn't likely to see a jump in buyers as a result. Forecasters indicate a 2023 could see a continued slowdown in housing even as home prices drop due to issues with overall affordability. A big hurdle for new home buyers will be the higher mortgage rates. 30-year fixed rates went up from about 3% to about 7% this year, according to economists, as the Federal Reserve upped interest rates in a bid to slow inflation. While that has contributed to falling home prices, it has also made it tougher for people to buy homes, especially as families also deal with rising costs for food, gas, and other necessities. That's a lot of more money that you have to pay out every month between 3% interest rate and 7% interest rates. It's a significant chunk of change that you have to pay out even when the housing prices are going down, said Dennis Shea, the executive director of the J. Roland Terwilliger Center for Housing Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Though mortgage rates are up over the last year, they've been falling in recent weeks, and the Mortgage Bankers Association predicts 30-year mortgage rates will drop to around 5.2 by the end of 2023. Other forecasters like Redfin and Realtor.com are also predicting that mortgage rates will likely fall slightly. Jerome Powell has also indicated that the central bank will scale back on its interest rate increases, which could help settle the market. Still, for many people trying to buy a home, the mortgage payment will be daunting. Right now you see home prices declining, so you'll probably continue to see that going forward, but affordability is still a major problem, said Shea. Wages have not kept pace with the housing market. Over the past year, we see mortgage rates have gone up dramatically, and that has priced many buyers out of the market. The tumultuous economy isn't just making it harder for new buyers to enter the market, it's also making it more difficult for people who already own homes to buy new ones. For example, a couple who bought a home 5 years ago on a low fixed mortgage rate may have a desire to move to a larger home with room for children, but that couple would be hit with a much larger mortgage rate purchasing the new home, which could make moving more difficult. People in the housing industry describe it as a mortgage lock-in effect. Homeowners with existing fixed-rate mortgages stay put to avoid higher payments. Realtor.com forecasts home prices are likely to slow and would potentially decline, though the stabilization could take several years, while Redfin predicts the median home sale price will drop around 4% next year. And the market will see 16% fewer home sales in the next year than in 2022, a fall to the lowest level since 2021. And again, when you get in a situation where people do start to look around to try to find a lower cost of living, to try to find a better job, or if they do, God forbid, get transferred at some point because a job shuts down, like in Belvedere, which I don't know if Chilaga's still here or not, but we talked about that yesterday. If you're in Belvedere and all of a sudden the job that you've had for the last 20 years just goes and gets shut down, and now you've got to either go down south where the factories have all moved, or maybe go try to find a new job somewhere else in the area. I mean, if you're living in Belvedere, your only real options other than the factory are going to Rockford, and I mean, nobody wants to go there. That'd be like going into downtown Chicago at that point. But with that being said, when you start to see things like that, if those houses can't sell, then these people are going to be out a lot of money on top of everything else. So it will come out to a cycle. Now, the upside on this is that, and I've talked with my mortgage broker about this, the fact that we're not going to see the big spiral coming out like we saw in 2008, 2009. where because the interest rates were flying up, the people that got the adjustable rates with the promise that when the rates go down, your prices are going to go down. The rates are the highest that they can be, and when they go down, they're going to go down. And then the adjustable rates all went up, and people started losing their houses because their house payments went up. We're not going to see a lot of that. A lot of people looked at that and said, I have no desire to ever be in an adjustable rate ever again. Which I think is good. I think that was the right move. And we didn't even have to make a law outlawing adjustable rates. People just saw the downside of it and said, nope, that's not for me. But we'll see what happens with that. And of course, there are going to be the people who cannot afford the food to put on their table and are going to have to downsize and see what they can actually get out of their houses. Either going back to renting or going and downsizing into a smaller house and still probably getting a higher payment because the interest rate is so high. But we'll see what happens with that and where that goes. All right, let's talk about the Fed rate increase. Got a couple stories on that here. I got a few, but we'll probably skip a couple. Actually, I've only got 3, so we'll see what happens with that. From CNBC to start with, Fed raises interest rates 0.5 point to highest level in 15 years. Let's see, it's 2022. That would bring us back to 15 years would be 2007, which is where all this mess started. From Jeff Cox. Again, the advantage that I do see about the fact that I will probably buy in this market with these interest rates is I'm in a situation where there's really no place to go but down as far as interest rates. So I can, if I can score a place under a decent amount of money, not the overinflated prices, but just for a decent amount of money, if I can score a place like that for relatively cheap, then in a few years when the interest rates go down, then I go back and refinance. Or buy something bigger. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday raised benchmark interest rate to the highest in 15 years, indicating the fight against inflation is not over despite some promising signs lately. Yeah, they still believe that, by the way. Keeping with expectations, the rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee voted to boost overnight borrowing rate 0.5 percentage point, taking it to a targeted range between 4.25 and 4.5. The increase broke a string of 4 straight 3/4 point hikes, the most aggressive policy moves since the early 1980s. Along with the increase came an indication that officials expect to keep rates higher through next year with no reductions until 2024. The expected terminal rate, or point where officials expect to end the rate hikes, was put at 5.1% according to the FOMC's dot plot of individual members. Investors initially reacted negatively to the expectation that rates may stay higher for longer, and stocks gave up earlier gains during a news conference. Jerome Powell said it was important to keep up the fight against inflation so the expectation of higher prices does not become entrenched. Inflation data received so far in October and November show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of price increases, the chair said at his post-meeting news conference. But it will take substantially more evidence to have confidence that inflation is on a sustained downward path. Because it's not on a downward path yet. I mean, we've got to get to a downward path before we can get to a sustained downward path. The new level marks the highest the Fed funds rate has been since December of 2007, just ahead of the global financial crisis, as the Fed was loosening policy aggressively to combat what would turn into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. This time around, the Fed is raising rates into what is expected to be a moribund economy in 2023. Members penciled in an increase of the funds rate until it hit a median level of 5.1% next year, equivalent to a target range of 5 to 5.25%. At that point, officials are likely to pause to allow the impact of monetary policy tightening to make its way through the economy. The consensus then pointed to a full percentage point worth of rate cuts in 2024, taking the funds rate to 4.1% at the end of the year. That is followed by another percentage point of cuts in 2025 to a rate of 3.1% before the benchmark settles to a longer run neutral level of 2.5%. Good luck. And that is all that I have to say about that. Good luck if you think that that's what's going to happen. Because the government's going to continue to funnel money into the Ukraine, although there's going to be a stop to that because the House holds the purse strings. They're going to find another way around that, and the neocons will get right on board, and they will approve any funding to go over there, but it's not going to be to the level that we saw in 2022. Definitely not. Drop that just a touch. That is a little bit loud. I do feel like I'm talking over that. Let's see. However, there was a fairly wide dispersion in the outlook for future years, indicating that members are uncertain about what's ahead for an economy dealing with the worst inflation it has seen since the early 80s. The newest dot plot featured multiple members seeing rates headed considerably higher for the median point for 2023 and 2024. For 2023, 7 of the 19 committee members, voters and non-voters included, saw rates rising about 5.25%. Similarly, there were 7 members who saw rates higher than the median 4.1 in 2024. This is actually going to be an unpopular opinion, and I know I'm not supposed to argue with CNBC or anything like that because they're financial experts. And do not take what I see as official financial advice, ever. But one of the things that I want to point out with this is I do think it's going to be higher than that. I think that it's going to stop at 6.5. I think is where it's going to land. And at that point, we're going to be in such a tailspin that we can't do anything else. I don't think 5.25 is going to be the top. I think 6.5 is. And part of why I think that they're going to do that, and part of that's going to be pressure from the Biden admin as well. Now, the Biden admin they were remiss with the Federal Reserve for raising the interest rates while they had Dems in control of the House, Senate, and the White House. But now, do keep in mind that they do have a new punching bag named Kevin McCarthy, who is probably going to be the speaker as much as I don't care for him. But they've got a new punching bag in Kevin McCarthy that they can now use and yell about when the inflation rate goes high. So the pressure that's going to be there is say, hey, keep the rates up there, wreck the economy. It's Kevin McCarthy's fault. It's Republicans' fault. And I don't think they're going to be shy about bringing it to maybe even 7. I don't think they'll get to 7. I think that our economy will be wrecked by 7. But we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from CNN to see what they think that this means for you. What rising interest rates mean for you, from Jeannie Sahadi. In its latest policymaking meeting of the year, the Federal Reserve on Wednesday raised its benchmark interest rate for the 7th time in a row to a range of 4.25 to 4.5. In a continued bid to tame decades-high inflation, the central bank may keep pushing rates higher next year too, albeit at a more modest pace. That, of course, means higher borrowing costs for consumers, but it also means your savings may actually start earning a little money after years of barely their interest. Yeah, your savings might earn a little bit of money, but one of the things to keep in mind with that is, while they may, that's absolutely a possibility, you actually have to have money in there to do so. And if the inflation is so high, you're spending all that money on food right now. But also, yeah, your savings will earn a little bit there. But will they earn as much as the inflation is on the dollars? And I pointed this out when I went and interviewed for the job that I currently work at versus the job that I previously worked at. I did get a 5% raise last year at the job that I used to work at. But I hadn't seen one during the Pinko Pox. I had seen one right before everything shut down for the commie coup. I think they gave me 50 cents right before everything shut down for the commie coup. And then they gave me $1, which was a little bit over a 5% raise. But the problem is that in 3 years, my dollar had lost 15.2% of its buying power. So that 5% was kind of a slap in the face at that point. And then when I interviewed, I sat down and I said, I need to see a minimum of 22. Because that will bring me back to what I was making before the inflation started. That will bring me back. That's just me breaking even back to where I was, which, I mean, at the time I considered that to be a good job. But that's the break-even point to get me back to where I was. Credit card rates are also at a record high and still increasing. Auto loan rates are at an 11-year high. Home equity lines of credit are at a 15-year high. I would not take a home equity line of credit right now. This is not official financial advice. An online savings account and CD yields haven't been this high since '08, said Greg McBride, chief financial analyst at Bankrate. The good news is there are ways to situate your money so you can benefit from the rising rates and protect yourself from their costs. Bank savings, shop around. You should be doing that anyway. Even under the best of circumstances, you should be doing that. Another high-yield savings option, given the day's high rates of inflation, Series 1 savings bonds. I love how CNN's solution is to go loan the government money. May be attractive because they're designed to preserve buying power of your money. They're currently paying 6.89%. Yes, because the government desperately needs to borrow money from you. They desperately need that so they don't have to jack you in taxes next year. Now, as much as I dislike the government, and this is also, again, not official financial advice, I do consider savings bonds to be a worthwhile investment under normal circumstances if you can stomach the government. But right now, with the spending being out of control, and again, the fact that with the spending being the way that it was, they are going to have to jack taxes on the people that voted for them. Some of the people that voted for them. Some of the people that voted for them don't pay any income taxes because they just get free money from the government. But no, I wouldn't do that right now. And again, not official financial advice, but I would not, because I would be the one right there to go punish the people who made the inflation so high, who spent the way that they did. Make them go face the American people and say, hey man, I guess we're going to have to raise your taxes after all. It wasn't really paid for. We couldn't get people to buy the damn bonds. So no, I would not, just on a principled stance, would not loan the government money. Let's see, there are some limitations. You can only invest $10,000 a year. You can't redeem it in the first year, and if you cash out between year 2 and 5, you'll forfeit the previous 3 months of interest. In other words, bonds are not a replacement for your savings account, McBride said. Nevertheless, they preserve the buying power of your $10,000 if you don't need to touch it for at least 5 years. And that's not nothing. They also may be a particular benefit to people planning to retire in the next 5 to 10, since they will serve as a safe annual investment and they can tap if needed in the first few years of retirement. Credit cards minimize the bite. When the overnight bank lending rate, also known as the Fed funds rate, goes up, various lending rates that banks offer their customers tend to follow. The average credit card rate hit its record high of $19.40 as of December 7th, up from $16.03 at the start of the year, according to Bankrate. Some retail store credit cards are now carrying whopping rates of more than 30%. Interest rate hikes will most acutely impact those consumers who do not pay off their credit card balances in full through the higher minimum monthly payment, said Michelle Ranieri, Vice President of U.S. Research and Consulting at TransUnion. Best advice, if you're carrying balances on your credit cards, which typically have high variable interest rates, consider transferring them to a zero-rate balance transfer card that locks in a zero rate for between 12 and 21 months. Which I did, by the way. When I stopped the credit card because there was what I thought was a fraudulent charge on it, when I stopped I'm not going to name the card, but the old credit card that I had with the higher credit line on it, I stopped using that. They sent me a new card after they cut off the card that I had. They sent me a new one so I could keep using the account, but I just put it in a drawer and I never activated it. And I'm just paying that one off because that one has, well, I got it when I had bad credit too, but that one has a high interest rate. The other one that I have has a 0 interest rate for 12 months. So up until September, I have no interest on that credit card at all. And that's the only one that I use. And although right now because I used that so much last month, I have a balance on it currently. I am working on getting that down right now. But I don't use the other one at all. Not even activated, just sitting in a drawer. But I would not look at any other credit card right now unless you can find one that's got a 0 for X amount of months. Home loans locked in fixed rates now. We talked about that. Overall portfolio. That, talk to your financial advisor about. Don't talk to CNN about that. Talk to your financial advisor about that. He knows your specific situation. So that's what they say this means for you, and I think I talked a little bit more about what this means for you than they did. And another one from CNBC before we go and talk about, well, I've got one more before we talk about the tornadoes after this. So, mortgage demand inches higher as interest rates move lower, from Diana Olick. After a month of declines, mortgage application volume is rising as current homeowners and potential buyers move on lowered mortgage rates. Applications rose 3.2% last week compared with the previous week, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association seasonally adjusted index. The average contract interest rate for 30-year fixed with conforming loan balances did increase ever so slightly last week to 6.42 from 6.41, with points increasing from 0.64 to 0.63, including the origination fee for loans with a 20% down payment. But the trajectory for rates has been lower for the past month as government reports showed inflation was cooling. Interest rates slid on Tuesday after the release of the November Consumer Price Index. Mortgage applications to refinance a home loan rose 3% last week from the previous week, but were still at 85% lower than the same week a year ago. The drop in rates from a high of just over 7% in October added to the still tiny pool of potential borrowers who could benefit from a refinance. Mortgage applications to purchase a home rose 4% for the week and were 38% lower than the same week a year ago. That annual comparison is now shrinking slightly as rates drop. The ongoing moderation in home price growth, along with further declines in mortgage rates, may encourage more buyers to return to the market in the coming months, Joel Kahn, an MBA economist, wrote in a release. Lower rates have shrunk demand for adjustable rate mortgages. ARMs dropped to 7.7% of total applications last week from just under 13% in October. When rates were much higher, ARMs offer lower rates but at a higher risk, since they will ultimately adjust at the end of their fixed terms to whatever market rate is then. So, I guess some people are trying to get into it right now, but I don't know, it's a risk. We'll see what happens. Alright, I wanted to talk about this one, again, because we're talking about finance, just briefly, because this is one of the things that's affecting home and land prices right now. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem calls for crackdown on Chinese farmland purchases. From Chris Pandolfo. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem on Tuesday announced new legislation to crack down on foreign purchases of agricultural land in her state. The bill comes as the governor has aggressively moved to counter China, which she called the greatest threat to the U.S. Noem's proposed legislation would create a new board called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. South Dakota, CFIUSSD, which will review proposed purchases of farmland by foreign investors. After an investigation, the committee will make recommendations to the governor on whether the purchase should be approved or denied. With this new process, we'll be able to prevent nations who hate us, like Communist China, from buying up our state's agricultural land. Noem said in a statement, "We cannot allow the Chinese Communist Party to continue to buy up our nation's food supply, so South Dakota will lead the charge on this vital national security issue." Noem and others have raised concerns over Chinese purchases of U.S. farmland, which they say could give hostile foreign power to greater control over the food supply. 51 Republican lawmakers sent a letter to 3 of President Biden's cabinet secretaries in September, warning of the alarming development for U.S. national security after a Chinese Communist Party-linked company bought land near North Dakota's Grand Forks Air Force Base. Data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture shows that the Chinese ownership of U.S. agricultural land has grown from $81 million in 2010 to $1.8 billion in 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported in September. The proposed South Dakota board would consist of the governor's general counsel, who would serve as the chairman, the secretary of the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and the director of the South Dakota Office of Homeland Security. The board would also have 2 appointed members, one of who would be an agricultural industry expert, and the other who would be a national security or foreign policy expert, according to the governor's office. So, I want to talk about this for just a moment, because one of the issues that we do see with this, and the communists, the Red Roses, are partially right when they talk about this. The fact that there's so much demand, and that's what drove the housing prices up. They're partially right about this. And some of this is coming from government investors. BlackRock comes to mind. We talked about that a lot when we were talking about what was going on in our economy. But the other big note of what's happening with housing prices and what's causing housing prices to be what housing prices are has to do with the amount of buyers out there. And it just stands to reason easily that if you take large swath buyers out of the equation, you're not going to bring the cost of that land down to bargain basement prices, but you are going to keep foreign actors, foreign agents from manipulating the market and trying to keep it up and out of the reach of the common man. I have very, very little use for government, but I do think, especially when it's a foreign entity involved, that they do have a place in this and say, no, we would rather have our citizens, the people who would pay taxes to us, income tax. Obviously, the Chinese are going to pay property tax, although I don't necessarily know how that works if they're foreign investors. But regardless, the people who are paying the income taxes should be getting deferential treatment off of this. For one small amount, there are some uses for government. Not many, I don't care for them very much. But keeping people from other nations from coming in and buying up all the land and leaving people like you and I out in the cold, yes, that is a definite situation where that can work. So that's what we see coming out of South Dakota. All right, let's talk the tornadoes. So we've got a few stories talking about what happened in Texas yesterday and what happened in Louisiana today. So we'll talk a bit about that. Starting with ABC News 8 out of Dallas. Texas tornado updates, 9 now confirmed in Tuesday's storms. From WFAA.com, and it does look like there's no text to this. Let me actually see if we can get the original back up here, because it looks like this is going to be a video only. Alright, so we got some video up here. Let's get this over here. Usually I archive these just because they autoplay all the time. But, if it's going to be like this, well, if there's going to be no text, then we'll just watch what the video says.
The National Weather Service is back on the ground right now surveying damage from yesterday's storms here in North Texas. This video is coming from Blue Ridge, which is northeast of McKinney in Collin County. You can see there quite a bit of damage done. That path of destruction extends several miles to the high school and to the cemetery there. No word yet on if a tornado has actually been confirmed at that location. Also hard hit, of course, Grapevine in Tarrant County. 5 people were hurt there yesterday. This is one of the 9 confirmed tornadoes across North Texas now. Most of the damage was done to businesses, but some homes were hit as well. We do know that a discount tire store, a Sam's Club, and Grapevine Mills Mall all suffered damage. Grapevine Mills did reopen this morning, but each store there may have different hours today, just depending. Also in Tarrant County, 3 tornadoes were confirmed near Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base just west of downtown Fort Worth. And further west in Wise County, here's the aftermath of another tornado. This is in Decatur. The storm there destroyed multiple homes and uprooted trees and injured 2 people there. So, boy, it was an active day yesterday. We knew that, of course, after going through that yesterday, but we just didn't know what this final tally would be. And just for transparency, this always happens after we have these storms. The next day is the assessment phase.
Yeah, and this will keep going the rest of the week, to be honest with you, because we got to figure out how long they were on the ground, the path width, and all these sorts of things. And when you have so many different areas that were impacted by these storms, I mean, it's not like there's an army of people that go out and survey these things. It's a group of maybe 10 to 15 people that have to go all around North Texas. You know, we cover 33 counties here in North Texas, and there were quite a few of them that were impacted by these storms. But here's the latest, what we know so far. 9 confirmed tornadoes at the moment. The ones across DFW. The one in Grapevine has been confirmed because we had the dramatic video of that one, but we do not have a rating on it just yet. One in North Richland Hills, which was an EF1. There are the 3 out by the Joint Reserve Base, EF0s, EF0, and EF1. The one up by Decatur, and EF2. North of DFW, the one in Callisburg, and EF0. Don't know just yet. Blue Ridge to Leonard. Highly likely a tornado happened there, but we don't have official confirmation of that just yet. One west of Paris, that was an EF2, and back to the west and southwest of DFW. We have a potential one near Hudson Oaks, another one near Toller, an EF1 that was confirmed south of Santo in Palo Pinto County, and another potential one back in Eastland County. So there you go. There's the we've had 9 confirmed so far, but obviously that I think there's a very good chance that that number will go up going forward.
Going on. All right, and we'll get rid of that one right away because it's just going to autoplay. But we'll read now from the Fort Worth Star Telegram. North Texas confirmed 12 tornadoes in North Texas Tuesday, National Weather Service says. From Elizabeth Campbell. Tuesday's storm spawned at least 12 confirmed tornadoes across North Texas, the National Weather Service said on Wednesday. It is confirmed and suspected tornadoes swept along the northeastern track from Cisco in Eastland County to Paris in Lamar County. The National Weather Service also reported Wednesday afternoon that there was an EF4 tornado with 125-mile-an-hour winds south of Eastland. The Weather Service also reported there was a short track of damage from 90-mile-an-hour winds south of Bluffdale in Erath County, which was likely a straight-line wind surge. At least 4 of the confirmed tornadoes were in Tarrant County, causing streaks of damage between the Naval Air Station and Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth to Grapevine, Texas. 2 of the tornadoes were EF4, with 65-mile-an-hour to 85-mile-an-hour winds. The other 2 were EF1, with winds up to 110 miles an hour. And there is some of the damage right there, too. Farther north in Wise County, an EF2 tornado with winds up to 125 miles an hour traveled a long path near Decatur, and a tornado with 85-mile-an-hour winds hit northwest of Callisburg, east of Interstate 35 near the Oklahoma border. Matt Stolley, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Fort Worth, said that while tornadoes are more common in the spring, it's not unusual to see tornadoes in this time of year. In 2015, an EF4 swept through Garland and Rowlett with winds up to 200 miles an hour. Yesterday's storms were less violent than those that we saw in 2015, KTZed. Tuesday's outbreak was triggered by a major winter storm that's bringing snow and ice to the Midwest and East Coast. In Grapevine, 5 people were injured. Grapevine Middle School had roof and water damage. In North Richland Hills, 20 homes and businesses were damaged, according to police. Tornadoes also caused havoc in Wise County, where homes were damaged near Decatur and semis overturned. Gina Wilkham, a public affairs specialist with State Farm, said the insurer had received approximately 360 claims from Tuesday's storms so far. A third of those were from Rockwall County, with 35% of the claims for wind and 30% for hail damage. So some pretty aggressive stuff going on there, and that storm surge did continue into Louisiana. Let's talk. I've got Fox 4 KDFW Dallas-Fort Worth. 12 tornadoes confirmed. So there we've got a map. And it really does look like after we got out of this area, it let up for a little bit before it caught on to some of that warm, moist air coming from the Mississippi River. And we may see more of them pop up. And we have this also caught on video. EF2 tornado captured on video. Homes damaged in Decatur. So let's watch.
A confirmed EF2 tornado caused this damage in Wise County, just southeast of Decatur. The tornado impacted an isolated area of the county, but still caused some damage to some homes there and other buildings, including businesses, and at least 2 people were hurt. Fox 4 Stephen Dial continues our coverage live in Wise County tonight. Stephen.
Heather, no one ever wants to be displaced due to a tornado, let alone it happening 2 weeks before Christmas. That's what happened to a family here in Wise County. And as you mentioned, the EF2 tornado injuring 2 people. Tornado! Around 7 a.m., some Wise County residents woke up to rain, strong winds, and a tornado, causing major damage to multiple homes and other structures.
So it was shaking the house really, really bad. And then I heard my mom screaming because she had my kids.
Isela Gonzalez was getting ready for work. Her family's home took the brunt of the tornado that tracked through the county, and the National Weather Service says had peak wind gusts of 125 miles per hour.
I was scared that somebody was hurt, like my mom and the kids, you know.
Crews worked past sundown to restore power along FM 730 south of Decatur. The Gonzalez family still in shock as some went in and out of the home to see what could be salvaged.
The people around us, like, they've been helping out.
Michael Lopez does not live far from the Gonzalez home. He recorded this video as transformers exploded outside his home.
That's very impressive how, you know, it was very close to us and yet not too much damage, but of course, you know, it's still a lot.
A neighboring home to the Gonzalez family took a direct hit as well. A majority of the home's metal roofing was ripped off and scattered around. Lopez knows that neighbor well.
It really it passed right in between us. My boss's houses, the roof is gone.
The Wise County emergency manager says there were 2 injuries from the tornado. A driver whose pickup truck had debris lodged into its side. The other was the driver of an 18-wheeler that was overturned. He was taken to the hospital with minor injuries.
Cages were everywhere.
Edgar Lopez is a friend of the Gonzalez family. He owns roosters and says the storm threw roosters all over the yard at the Gonzalez home.
I brought him some cages just to help, so he can put them on there because he don't, you know, all those cages broke. They flew out of here. So I brought him some stuff to help him, you know, get his pets secured. There's a big loss right here where they took, you know, it's going to take them a couple of months for them to get back on their feet.
Gonzalez told me her children's school collected some items for them to pick up when they picked up the kids from school this afternoon, and they are staying at a hotel tonight.
A confirmed EF2 tornado caused.
All right, so there's that. Power is flashing as possible tornado moves through Decatur. saw the one clip of this already.
¡A la madre! ¡Es un tornado, Andrea! ¡Mira, vení! Dices que era un tornado.
Pero para allá se fue, va.
¡A la madre!
Scary stuff. Thankfully, it does not look like there were any fatalities in this particular cell, which is miraculous, especially when we're seeing EF4s like that. That is a miracle in and of itself. But it does look like we did see some a little bit further. And I know Arvold, you're probably in the line of this. Let's grab one from NOLA.com. Video shows tornado moving through New Orleans area, including Gretna. Now, we can't go back and get the original source material off of this one because these guys are, shut off your ad blocker. But we'll read what they have to say. Posts on social media showed video of a tornado that struck Gretna and was moving near the downtown New Orleans late Wednesday afternoon. Just want to see. No, they're not going to give me that. I thought they might. Live footage of the tornado was shown on WDSU TV after a tornado warning was issued for New Orleans around 3:45 p.m. and it wasn't set to expire until 4:30 p.m. There were reports of at least 3 people dying in Louisiana on Wednesday, F in the chat. As severe storms moved across the state, in New Iberia there was a report of a hospital being hit, F. We can actually get this here as well. So there were reports of at least 3 people dying in Louisiana on Wednesday as severe storms moved across the state. In New Iberia, there was a report of a hospital being hit. Footage of the tornado moving through the New Orleans area quickly began to pop up on social media. We do have a couple of videos that we can see of this. But of course, again, we can't just take the video because, you know. Alright, this is 10:46 p.m. Right on top, thank you for that.
That's crossed the river.
On the west bank.
That's side. Coming to that's the water. Oh.
Ooh, I don't play with lightning.
Whoa. The truck can't see it.
Everybody needs to be off the highway right now.
God.
It's coming to this side.
Yeah, you see the water?
Yeah,
there it go.
And I see the debris.
Oh, it's in the water. Jonathan at the
It's in the water. What else do we have? WDSU. Yeah, there's some of the aftermath while we're going down looking for the video. Power outage update. All of it. The emergency crews. We might actually have to mute that for copyright. Christmas music in the background makes it. Because homie didn't even turn his radio off before he started recording. The Winn-Dixie took the brunt of it.
We are just off the West Bank Expressway, the Barataria exit. We came through Gretna. Gretna has some power. It looked like the tornado went through there. And you saw that lightning bolt just now. That was pretty big. Yeah, so this is the Winn-Dixie in Marrero here right now. Gretna also has some tornado damage, but nothing as serious as this. On the other side of the expressway, there is also some damage to some buildings. It looked like the tornado definitely came from the river towards this side of the expressway. And we'll have another report here. We're going to go talk to some law enforcement officials and see what they tell us.
There's some more damage.
The tornado that came through here snapped some power lines. We're right next to the West Bank Expressway, and you can see that for several blocks, the power lines have been snapped in two. There's no power in this area. There's a police presence down there trying to stop people from coming down this way. But yeah, the power lines here in Marrero, just off Barataria on the West Bank Expressway. A tornado definitely came through here. We showed you the Winn-Dixie, and then here are the power lines.
All right, so that's what they have for that. Let's grab one more. Tornado on the West Bank. Let's see what Jeremiah has to say. All right, so that's what we see for that. All right, let's read one from NBC. Tornado touches down in Louisiana as Alabama and Mississippi remain under watches. From Minivan Burke. A tornado struck New Iberia, Louisiana on Wednesday, briefly trapping people in their homes, police and the National Weather Service, Lake Charles, said. The tornado touched down in the Southport subdivision area just before 11 a.m. A NWS spokesperson said a storm survey will be conducted to determine its strength. Has anybody checked on Eric the Red with Rebel with a Cause podcast? Although he was posting in one of the group chats I'm in, so I think he's fine. I don't know where he is in here, but he's somewhere close to this area. A police spokesperson said in a video update around 1:30 p.m. that all damaged buildings and structures were searched and everyone has been rescued. So far, no fatalities have been reported, just injuries, which these individuals are being treated at local hospitals. It does sound like that has gone up to 3 at this point, which is F in the chat. The spokesperson said. Earlier Wednesday, tornado watches had been issued for parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, where 2 people, including a child, were killed when a storm tore through the area on Tuesday. The National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center said the Wednesday storms were expected to bring numerous tornadoes, with intense tornadoes likely, hail and scattered damaging wind, gusts of roughly 70 miles an hour are possible, and update states. Thousands of people in Louisiana and Mississippi remain without power after Tuesday's storms, according to PowerOutage.us. Just over 6,000 customers are still in the dark as of early Wednesday afternoon. In Louisiana, that number is 8,213. The storms claimed did they miss a word in that sentence somewhere? The storm claimed at least the 2 lives, a boy and his mother, in Louisiana. Officials identified them Wednesday as Nicholas Little, 8, and his mother, Yoshiko Smith. So we did lose 2 on this one, unfortunately. And I'm going to skip the Fox News one, and we will go forward from there at that point. So yeah, I mean, and if you're in the path, I know that, again, I've got Special K, Kirsten, over on Twitter, is somewhere in that region. I don't know if it's in the path or not. I know that Arbold is in that region. Eric the Red is in the New Orleans area, so somebody ought to go check on him. And I do have to go check on Miss McLeod as well, because she's in the Texas area. It kind of looks like all the storms went right around her, though, so... But I still will reach out and say, hey, is everything okay? Alright, let's talk Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried hit with 8 criminal charges, including fraud and conspiracy for allegedly misappropriating the FTX customer funds from Sindhu Sundar. So this is just going to be a brief update of what we talked about yesterday, because this should have all the charges. Here are your 8 charges. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers. Wire fraud on customers. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders. Wire fraud on lenders. Conspiracy to commit commodities fraud. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Conspiracy to commit money laundering. Conspiracy to defraud the United States and violate the campaign finance laws. What do I think he's actually going to go down for? I think his lawyer is going to get the conspiracy dropped on both counts here. Commodities fraud is probably going to get dropped. The rest of them I think are going to stick. Especially this one, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and violate the campaign finance laws. I think he's going to get hit with that one, and I think he's going to go down hard for that one. Because the governors, or the government officials who made a bunch of money off of him, need to make it look like they're going to go hard on him. So they save face with the American public. From the Daily Wire, on the other side of this, Kevin O'Leary testifies before Congress after endorsing defunct crypto exchange FTX. From Ben Ziesloft. We don't have any video of this one, unfortunately, but we'll read a little bit of what his statement had to say. Celebrity investor Kevin O'Leary testified before the Senate Banking Committee on Wednesday regarding the collapse of cryptocurrency exchange FTX, which he had promoted to the public. FTX filed for bankruptcy last month after users discovered that the company was intertwined with sister trading firm Alameda Research. Both were controlled by now broke former billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried and a handful of amateur executives. O'Leary, known for serving as a judge on the reality startup show Shark Tank, told lawmakers in his opening statement that he had lost approximately $15 million in digital assets and equity he earned as spokesperson of the FTX, but insisted that the industry still has upside potential. The collapse of FTX is nothing new. While the situation is painful for the shareholders, employees, and account holders, in the long run, it does not change the industry's promise, argued the entrepreneur, who still has investments in other crypto companies. Enron came and went and had no impact on the energy markets. Are you kidding me? Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers' demise had no impact on the long-term potential of American debt and equity markets. Again, I'm not sure that's actually the case. Beyond supporting efforts to create a well-regulated stablecoin backed by the dollar, O'Leary expressed support for new regulations on the broader crypto sector. This nascent industry is culling its herd, he said. Going or gone are the inexperienced or incompetent managers, weak business models, and rogue unregulated operators. Hopefully, these highly publicized events will put renewed focus on implementing domestic regulation that has been stalled for years. Jennifer Schulp, the director of the Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute Center for Monetary and Financial Alternatives, contended that regulations should not inhibit market forces in the crypto space, while circumspection around novel class of asset and technology is more than fair. It's entirely different from actively preventing individuals from accessing an instrument that approximately 1 in 5 Americans, by some measures, already have chosen to use for diverse purposes, from trading to sending remittances, she said. But again, as I mentioned yesterday, and again, why we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. The big problem with this is the fact that this gave the government the excuse to go back out and try to regulate this industry, to try to get their fingers intertwined into it and involved into it. So, well, we'll continue to watch this and see what happens with this. Now that the guy's in custody, this actually is quite a bit more interesting to me. Let's talk about Georgia and the runoff. From the Hill, Raffensperger calls on Georgia to end runoff elections. From Max Greenwood, look at that. Look at that horrendous face. The horrendous face is somebody who wants to go back out and bomb the crap out of the Middle East again. But we're not talking about Mr. Mitt Romney. We're talking about Brad Raffensperger now. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is calling on legislators to do away with the state's runoff system for general elections, arguing that the process places too heavy a burden on voters and election officials. I gotta think that that's massively expensive, especially in today's hyper-divided, hyper-politicized world. And with Georgia being as much of a swing state as it is. Because I gotta think at this point, we're going to be coming into a situation where we're going to get runoffs for almost every election. The governor's race was actually kind of a fluke, in my opinion. Partially because Stacey Abrams was such a terrible candidate, but also partially off the fact that Georgia is very evenly divided right now. And then, of course, for the Senate, you had two terrible candidates, but I mean, you ran basically 2 elections for the last 2 cycles, as far as the Senate went. State law currently requires a candidate to receive more than 50% of the vote in a general election to win outright. If no candidate hits the threshold, the race heads to a runoff between the top 2 vote getters. It's a relatively unusual system. Only one other state, Louisiana, requires runoffs when no candidate receives a majority of the vote. In most other states, candidates only need to win a plurality of the vote to clinch the victory, while Maine and Alaska rely on ranked choice voting to decide elections. Georgia's runoff election system has become even more demanding under a new law that puts into place last year that significantly shortened the runoff period from 9 weeks to just 4 weeks, a time frame that ran through the Thanksgiving holiday season. In his statement, Raffensperger said the state's general election runoff system was simply too demanding to put undue pressure on county officials and voters, especially during the holidays. I agree with Raffensperger, and it's not just for the financial aspect of it. It is the fact that we do need to know who is going to be the winner by the end of election night, and put some stakes onto it too. I mean, I like Shane Hazel as a person. I've talked to him. He's an okay guy as a person. But I don't like Shane Hazel, the politician, who comes out and brags about the fact that, I forced a runoff. And what was it, Chase Masters, the libertarian this time through, who did the same thing. Hey, look at me, I forced a runoff. Well, now we have a socialist in the Senate, twice over. A Marxist socialist, which, I mean, you kind of played yourself at that point. Let's grab one from The Blaze. Detroit School Board called out for political stunt, voting to remove Dr. Carson's name from a public high school while it fails students. From Joe McKinnon. The Detroit School Board voted in November to remove Dr. Carson's name from the Benjamin Carson High School of Medicine and Science. This political stunt did not go unnoticed. While Carson did not challenge the revision, countless others, including students and some of the Carson's former colleagues, denounced the apparent cancellation. Some have pointed out the pettiness of the partisan stunt, while others have suggested there might be better uses of the school board's time, such as making substantial improvements to the grossly underperforming school it oversees. On November 15th, the Detroit School Board approving the renaming of the Benjamin Carson High School of Science and Medicine to Crockett Midtown High School of Science and Medicine. Democrat School Board member Sherry Gay Dagnogo said that the community members complained about the name and its link to the Trump admin. Gay Dagnogo asked the board to scrap the name so that we don't have a direct affiliation with that mindset, especially as it relates to people with challenges, housing needs, etc., Chalkbeat Detroit reported. Former board president Lamar Lemons previously told the Washington Post that Carson had stayed in medicine. We would have been happy to put his name in a school. We looked at him as an honored son. Carson, having worked with the democratically elected former president on Americans' behalf, Lemons claimed, is synonymous with having Trump's name on our school in blackface. Are you kidding? Carson High School opened in 2011 and was named as such because the doctor was widely held up as a role model for black youth. Carson is the esteemed former Housing and Urban Development Secretary. While he accomplished a great deal for millions of Americans while working with the Trump admin, Carson is also a renowned neurosurgeon who managed significant feats in medicine. In 1987, Carson performed the first successful separation of conjoined twins attached at the back of the head. The New York Times also noted in a piece calling Carson a folk hero that the doctor had mastered and refined the procedure known as hemispherectomy, sparing a 4-year-old girl from uncontrollable seizures and enabling her to speak again. For having accomplished so much and inspiring a generation of black doctors, a public high school was named after Carson in the city where he grew up, and in the school system where his education first started. That school will no longer bear Carson's name, however, on account of his conservative and Republican affiliations. And that is just the pettiness of it. And I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. And once again, as I talk about what was happening in Georgia, the partisan divide in this country, where you can't even be associated with the Republican Party anymore if you're in any sort of the public dole. Meanwhile, this guy is a genius, a role model for the people in that community. And again, if you're failing students out of this school, even if it is a public school, you should probably be thinking a little bit harder about what's going on in your school than what the name is at this point. You really should. Especially if it's a specialty school too, because I would think that you'd have to have an aptitude test of some sort to get into a specialty school. I lived in Kenosha for 10 years. I know what ITA used to be before they took the academy out of it, took the entrance exam out of it, and made it into Indian Trail High School. But yeah, you had to be selected, especially from the Kenosha public school system, to go there when it first started out. And I can cite this knowing that I know a family where I knew all 3 siblings. The elder 2 went to Indian Trail Academy. One went into the business school, one went into the biosciences school. And actually, I know somebody else who went to that school as well. I know a bunch of people that went to that school. And yeah, they had to be top of their class to get into that school. But the specific family that I cited to begin with, the elder 2 went to that high school, and the youngest daughter, the youngest sibling in that school, did not. She went to Bradford. Because she didn't have the test scores and the ability to get into Indian Trail Academy. So it really was. I mean, they were only taking people they knew they could get out of there, graduate out, and put out into the world of business or science. You would think if this was a high school for medicine and science, they would have a similar standard, but I guess maybe not. We're going to talk about TikTok again. We talked about that yesterday. U.S. lawmakers introduced bill to ban TikTok. From Brian Fung. Full disclosure, I do not like TikTok. I will never put TikTok on any device that I ever own. I don't watch TikTok. I do see TikToks every once in a while, but they're either sent to me on Snapchat, or I see them in the version in the form of Reels on Instagram without actually having to have the TikTok app on my phone to do so. And a lot of people just take their TikToks and upload them as Reels on Instagram. It happens. It's not that I don't necessarily understand the concept, I just don't want to have ByteDance having my data. But that is a personal choice of mine, and I would not impose that on somebody else. If somebody wants to watch mentally challenged teenagers dance and gyrate wildly and dance badly and lip sync badly, that's their decision. The government has no place in that decision. But let's read. Did we get the author name on this one? Brian Fung, yes we did. A trio of U.S. lawmakers introduced a new legislation that aims to ban TikTok from operating in the United States. The new bill by Marco Rubio, the top Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and a bipartisan pair of congressmen in the House, reflects the latest escalation by U.S. policymakers against the Chinese-owned short-form video app TikTok, has faced doubts about its ability to safeguard U.S. user data from the Chinese government. Again, as much as I dislike the idea that is between you and the Chinese government, that is not my decision to make for you, and it's not the government's decision to make for you either. The proposed legislation would block and prohibit all transactions in the U.S. by social media companies with at least 1 million monthly users that are based in or under the substantial influence of countries considered foreign adversaries, including China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. I'm going to say the vast majority of these apps are not going to be coming from the latter 4 of those countries. The bill specifically names TikTok and its parent ByteDance as social media companies for the purposes of the legislation. Rubio and one of the House sponsors of the bill, Wisconsin Republican Mike Gallagher, had indicated their intention to introduce the bill in a Washington Post op-ed last month. The legislation comes as a wave of states led by Republican governors have introduced state-level restrictions on the use of TikTok on government-owned devices. And again, just as I mentioned yesterday, that is actually fair and in play. If your cell phone is owned by your work, and they don't want you using TikTok, especially if that work is the government, that's between you and your employer. And since they own the property, that's their prerogative. The flurry of activity contrasts with the lengthy negotiations TikTok has been having for years with the government on a potential deal that may allow the company to address the national security concerns and continue serving U.S. users. The federal government has yet to take a single meaningful action to protect American users from the threat of TikTok, Rubio said in a statement. There is no more time to waste on meaningless negotiations with a CCP puppet company. It's time to ban Beijing-controlled TikTok for good. And again, and this is just the mind-blowing part for me, because I can't understand this. And I've never understood where the government feels it's their responsibility to protect you from your own stupidity. It's the same thing with the FTX thing. It's not the government's place to protect you when a smooth-talking, nappy-haired businessman decides to talk you out of your crypto because you didn't do enough research to know that it was a scam. That is your own fault, and you have to reap the consequences of it. We will continue to brief members of Congress on the plans that have been developed under the oversight of our country's top national security agencies, plans that were well underway in implementing to further secure our platform in the United States, McQuaid added. TikTok has previously said it doesn't share information with the Chinese government and that a US-based security team decides who can access US user data from China. TikTok has also previously acknowledged that employees based in China can currently access user data. Yes, they can, and that is something that you do need to take into account before you open up an account on TikTok, and it's the reason that I don't have one. But again, I will never tell you what it is that you can and cannot do with your own property. Governors in Iowa, North Dakota, and Alabama joined the GOP colleagues in banning TikTok for state employees. From Jared Gons. The Republican governors of 3 more states have joined the growing number of GOP governors who are banning TikTok among state government employees amid security concerns about the Chinese-owned social media platform. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds each signed EOs in the past 2 days to ban the app from state-owned devices. Republican governors in Maryland, South Dakota, Texas, and Utah have already taken action to ban TikTok for state employees' devices. Again, the states own the cell phones, so that is their prerogative. Ivey said in a memo sent to state employees on Tuesday that the data that TikTok, which is owned by a Chinese parent company, collects could be subject to Chinese laws, allowing it to be shared with the CCP. She said she's asked the state's Secretary of Information Technology to update their agency's policies to prevent TikTok from accessing the state IT network and state IT devices, with exceptions for law enforcement and other essential government uses of the app. Burgum said in a release announcing the executive order banning the app for state-owned devices that the user prohibits the executive branch agencies and their employees from visiting TikTok's website or downloading the app while using a state-owned device or connected to the state network. Protecting citizens' data is our top priority, and our IT professionals have determined, in consultation with federal officials, that TikTok raises multiple flags in terms of the amount of data it collects and how that data may be shared with and used by the CCP, he said. Reynolds' order bans TikTok on state-owned devices and prohibits state agencies from subscribing to or owning an account. Agencies, okay. Again, that is within their purview. The first time I read through that, I thought it said prohibit state employees, but it does not. A TikTok spokesperson said in a statement that the company is disappointed with the state's actions, but it's their prerogative. And you can still data mine from the teenage daughter of the governor or the state rep or the state patrol officer. You just can't do it on their state-owned devices. Deal with it. Twitter actually got a bite of this as well. From Fox News, Twitter up in arms as calls to ban TikTok grow. Trump was right. From Jeffrey Clark. Twitter influencers and politicians on both sides of the aisle have united in calls to ban TikTok after lawmakers proposed bipartisan legislation to stop the most popular app in the world from operating in the U.S. Marco Rubio spearheaded the push to ban TikTok, arguing in a press statement Tuesday that the reasons to bar the app were easily apparent and widely agreed on. From the FBI director to FCC commissioners to cybersecurity experts, everyone has made clear the risk of TikTok being used to spy on Americans. The legislation would effectively demonetize any app in China's orbit and is titled Averting the National Threat of Internet Surveillance, Oppressive Censorship, and Influence and Algorithmic Learning by the Chinese Communist Party Act. Or in short, who do they pay to write these acronyms? I've always wanted to know that, and I want to know, how do you get that job? How do you get the job where you can go and write these acronyms for a living? The Antisocial CCP Act. That is your tax dollars at work right there. We're not having a conversation about the inflation that's running rampant and how to do anything like that. We aren't getting anywhere on the Hunter Biden laptop, but we can pay somebody to find a way to make an acronym for Antisocial CCP Act. Golf clap. Rubio also exposed TikTok as a Chinese government-sponsored backdoor into Americans' phones and private data in a Twitter post the next day. The Communist government of China can access the private data of any American using TikTok at any time they want. TikTok should be banned. Rubio tweets out, this isn't a GOP-led TikTok ban craze. It's an over 3-year effort that's always been bipartisan. But CNN's obsession with bashing Republicans is so ingrained in their culture, their journalists reflexively defend anyone we are against, even the CCP. With video, let's see if we can find that from Marco Rubio. Yep, there it is, right there on top. So let's listen to what CNN had to say about this.
A new bill from Republican Senator Marco Rubio aims to ban TikTok in the U.S. The legislation is an escalation of a recent move by red state governors to eliminate the app from state devices. Alabama and Utah are the latest to join the effort.
South Dakota was the first state to do it over concerns that China, the government there, can access TikTok's information since its parent company is based in China. A TikTok executive testified to Congress that the company does not share data with the Chinese government. CNN's Oliver Darcy is here with details. So tell us about the moves to get rid of TikTok.
Yeah, I think there are two things going on here, right? One is that lawmakers have legitimate concerns about TikTok, about whether U.S. data can be assessed by the Chinese, which obviously TikTok says no, and then whether China could eventually tweak the algorithm, maybe at some point, to alter U.S. perception toward the Chinese government. Those are some concerns that lawmakers have. I think the other thing that's happening here is Republican lawmakers, primarily, are using TikTok as the face of the Chinese government. And so to show to their constituents, which is very popular right now, to have a hard stance on China, to show to their constituents that they're taking this hardline stance, they are basically saying we want to ban TikTok and using this as a vehicle to deliver that message to their base.
I guess the way you can sum it up is there's no real independent company in China right now, right? Yeah. If the government wants access to data, they will get access from a data that's headquartered in the country. So how do you move forward? Because this was something that President Trump at the time tried to get rid of, and he got a lot of pressure not to.
Yeah, and I think this is we are so intermixed with China. I mean, I was talking to a TikTok source or someone familiar with them, and they were pointing out that a lot of lawmakers are tweeting about TikTok on their Chinese-made Apple iPhones. And so it really shows how many businesses are reliant on China, and TikTok, obviously, one of them caught up in the mix right now.
Yeah, and it's part of the conversation we've had about Twitter. People who are saying you should not be on Twitter, it's a cesspool, tweet out those statements to people on Twitter, on the platform they're saying people should boycott. So, point received. Oliver Darcy, thank you.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.
And I can see where Rubio's coming from off of that. And, I mean, realistically, yes, CNN has the reflexive need to go back and support anything that a Republican is against. I mean, that's well known at this point. But again, as I said, I don't like TikTok. I think it's kind of stupid, actually, the idea. But, of course, I make long-form content. I typically make an hour to 2 hours worth of content every day, all in one stretch. So the whole minute thing is not for me to begin with. But secondly, and I mean this is the important part with that, is it's also, I don't think, the government's business, frankly. Unless you're using a phone that's owned by the government, it's not their concern. Full stop. Let's talk Biden, who can't speak without having his sunglasses on. Biden ties transgender laws to racism and anti-Semitism. They're all connected, man. Which again always goes down to the idea of think about who it is that you can't criticize. From Carlos Garcia. President Biden tied transgender laws to racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism in a bizarre speech after signing the pro-gay marriage bill on Tuesday. Biden was speaking before an audience on the South Lawn of the White House in D.C. when he made the comments. We need to challenge the hundreds of callous and cynical laws introduced in states targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors who give children the care that they need, man. Come on. We have to protect these children so they know they're loved and will stand up for them. and so they can speak for themselves, man. Racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, they're all connected, man. Come on. But the antidote to hate is love. This law and the love it defends strikes a blow against hate in all its forms, man. And that's why this law matters to every single American. He went on to claim the law was rooted in the secular and sacred promise of the Declaration of Independence that all people are created equal. 12 Republicans crossed the aisle and joined Democrats to pass the bill, misnamed the Respect for Marriage Act. And since I call it out for CNN and ABC and NBC, I will call it out here too. The editorializing just, it has to stop. It has to. Critics of the law say it will impair religious freedoms and open a floodgate of lawsuits against churches, schools, and other agencies that refuse to affirm the same-sex marriage. A commentary at the Heritage Foundation outlined the dangers of the legislation for religious institutions. While this bill does not provide any additional protections to those in same-sex unions, it does empower an ideologically motivated bureaucracy and activist regime with all the legal fodder necessary to attack people of faith. While Christians are used to the false claim that they are bigots, the bill would impact religious persons who hold traditional marriage, including those of Jewish or Muslim faiths or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And here is the video of Biden's statement.
Excuse me, because they support LGBTQ children and families, have to speak out. We must stop the hate and violence, like we just saw in Colorado Springs, where a place of acceptance and celebration was targeted for violence and terror. We need to challenge the hundreds of callous, cynical laws introduced in the states targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors who give children the care they need. We have to protect these children so they know they are loved, and we will stand up for them and say they can seek for themselves. Folks, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, they're all connected. But the antidote to hate is love. This law and the love it defends strike a blow against hate in all its forms. And that's why this law matters to every single American, no matter who you are or who you love. This shouldn't be about conservative or liberal, red or blue. No, this is about realizing the promise of the Declaration of Independence, a promise rooted in the sacred and secular beliefs, a promise that we're all created equal.
And a big side of this, and again, this should not be at a federal level. But they're not going to be, that's the other side of it. They're not going to stop. They've elevated their big victim group, so now they have to go find another perpetual victim to come back out and pander to keep votes with. And if you don't support this new victim group, then you're a hateful bigot or a Republican. What would contemporary be? No, we're not there yet. Actually, I want to flop these two around. Even though this means that we will have two Daily Wires back to back, I do want to flop these two around. Because Whoopi Goldberg had to say something about the Respect for Marriage Act. From the Daily Wire, though, Republican Congresswoman grills trans activists during hearing over call to accost Supreme Court justices. Yeah, I bet you she's going to be called a bigot too, because, oh, you know, she criticized that person that you can't criticize. From Daily Wire News. Nancy Mace grilled Alejandra Caraballo, a far-left transgender activist, during a House hearing on Tuesday over some of the past statements the activist has made. The exchange happened during a House Oversight and Reform Committee hearing on the evolution of anti-democratic extremist groups and the ongoing threat to democracy. Mace asked all the witnesses called by Democrat-controlled committee if rhetoric on social media was a problem or a threat to U.S. democracy. All of the witnesses answered yes. Mace then asked if rhetoric targeting officials with violence presented a threat to U.S. democracy. Again, all of the witnesses responded yes. Mace then pulled up old tweets from Caraballo after the Supreme Court overturned Roe, in which Caraballo wrote highly inflammatory remarks. And with that, we're going to skip ahead and we're going to watch the video provided to us by Libs of TikTok. Let's listen.
Is rhetoric on social media a problem and a threat to our democracy, Mr. Ward?
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Ms. Caraballo?
Yes.
Ms. Nomani?
Yes.
Ms. Tyler?
Yes.
Yes.
Another question I have, do you believe that rhetoric targeting officials with violence for carrying out their constitutional duties is a threat to democracy, Mr. Ward? Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Only a few weeks after the attempted attack on a Supreme Court justice on June 25th, one of the witnesses, Alejandra Caraballo, tweeted out the following in response to a decision on abortion overturning Roe v. Wade, and I'll quote directly from the tweet: "The 6 justices who overturned Roe should never know peace again. It is our civic duty to accost them every time they're in public. They are pariahs. Since women don't have their rights, these justices should never have a peaceful moment in public again." I know something about being accosted. The night of January 5th, I was physically accosted on the streets of D.C. in Navy Yard by a constituent of mine. I fervently blamed rhetoric on social media, rhetoric at public events, for being physically accosted. I carry a gun everywhere I go when I am in my district and I'm at home, because I know personally that rhetoric has consequences. I've had my car keyed. I've had my house spray painted. I had someone trespass in my house as recently as August. I've been doxxed on social media about where I live. And I've had to add to security everywhere I go. Often, because I can't afford it, I have to carry my own firearm wherever I go. And Alejandra Caraballo.
Well, you should be doing that anyway, but we'll move past that for a moment.
Also recently tweeted on November 19th, not even a month ago, that the Supreme Court, vested with the judicial power of the United States by our Constitution, stated they are not a legitimate court issuing decisions. And also the Supreme Court is an organ of the far right. So my last question today of Ms. Caraballo: do you stand by these comments, this kind of rhetoric on social media? And do you believe it's a threat to democracy?
Thank you, Representative, for the opportunity to clarify and provide context to my tweets.
I have a question. Is it yes or no? Do you believe your rhetoric is a threat to democracy when you're calling to accost a branch of government, the Supreme Court?
I don't believe that's a correct characterization of my
tweeted,
statements.
Though. Did you not tweet that you thought that the Supreme Court justices should be accosted?
What I'm saying is that
yes
that is not an accurate characterization of my statements.
On June 8th of this year, a man was arrested near Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home in Maryland. He told law enforcement officers he wanted to kill a Supreme Court justice. He was found with a knife, with a pistol, 2 magazines, ammunition, pepper spray, zip ties, a hammer, crowbar, and duct tape.
Ms. Caraballo.
Dude, you can, let me back that up just a little bit. You can look at Raskin over there's like, oh, come on. We're not supposed to be bringing any of this out right now. No, that was supposed to be for the good. Look at his face.
Kill a Supreme Court justice. He was found with a knife, with a pistol, 2 magazines, ammunition, pepper spray, zip ties, a hammer, crowbar.
This is devastating to the narrative.
And duct tape.
Ms. Caraballo. On page 12 and 13 of your written testimony, you painted concerned parents as having been infiltrated by white nationalists and far-right militia groups, which played a significant role in school board protests. This is not This has not actually been my experience with concerned parents. In your testimony, you wrote that in Loudoun County, Virginia, unfounded rumors that spread in local parent groups on Facebook about an alleged trans student sexually assaulting a girl in a bathroom led to a firestorm of several heated school board protests that descended into violence. But in fact, the perpetrator, it actually turned out, had committed 2 sexual assaults at 2 different Loudoun County schools in 2021 and was arrested on October 7th, 2021 by the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. These weren't unfounded rumors, as you suggest. It actually turns out law enforcement had to act because a sexual assault occurred. So giving this, I'm assuming that until now you were unaware of what happened here, and you're going to update your testimony for the committee. Is that correct?
And they cut the video before we got the chance to get the answer off of that. But yeah, they'd have no problem inflaming tensions as long as they're the ones that are doing it. All right, and speaking of the Respect for Marriage Act, Whoopi Goldberg. The Republicans that cross the aisle, they can't be good Republicans, man. They can't actually be good Republicans. They have to have been pressured by somebody. Perhaps a lover, Whoopi Goldberg, hints Republicans who voted for marriage bill were threatened to do so. From Virginia Kruta. The View co-host, Whoopi Goldberg, suggests that all of the Republicans who voted in favor of the so-called Respect for Marriage Act may have done so at the stern behest of a friend or perhaps a lover. During Wednesday's broadcast of the long-running ABC Midday Talk Show, Goldberg and her co-host discussed the legislation, which President Biden signed into law Tuesday in a lavish ceremony that included drag queens, among others. So let's listen to what it was she had to say, and then I will comment on it. Then we will read about Dorsey, talk about something I'm thankful for, and head out of here for the night. Let's listen to Whoopi Goldberg.
Legal.
I never knew it wasn't
Gay marriage
legal.
is
Well,
legal.
no, it wasn't legal until 1964.
It wasn't
Loving's,
even federalized.
It was never federalized.
Now it's
So does that
federalized.
mean that these Republicans who are against the gay marriage bill are also against interracial marriage? That's bad policy to get reelected.
I doubt that is. No, it's not that. It's the fear of like polyamory or like you're going to marry a
Wait a
relative.
minute, I'm
It's
sorry.
not
Is that
happening.
what it is?
I mean, I think.
That must be the slippery slope. Bestiality? Is that what they're thinking?
The biggest threat to straight marriage is straight couples. Like,
Well,
that's
yeah,
the hardest thing.
that's the biggest threat. And any time somebody decides that they want to get married, celebrate them.
Yeah.
Celebrate them.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that it's like Jim Crow laws, voting for that. Because you're giving the finger to lots of married couples. And I suspect many of these folks voted the way they did because somebody they know said, if you don't vote this way, I'll never speak to you again. Perhaps a lover, maybe a friend. We'll be right back.
This is our discourse, folks. All right, and the last one that we're going to go over here comes to us from CNBC. Jack Dorsey admits mistakes at Twitter and says the site still has problems. From Jonathan Vanian. Twitter and co-founder and CEO Jack Dorsey didn't mention Elon Musk by name, but in a blog post on Tuesday, he made it clear that the company he once led still had significant problems then and now. Dorsey said he was adding his voice to a discussion around the Twitter files, which Musk started releasing last week to support his claims that prior management was biased against conservatives in its handling of content. At the beginning of his post, Dorsey said he's come to believe in 3 principles. Social media must withstand corporate and government control. The author is the only person who can remove content they produce, and moderation is best implemented by algorithmic choice. The Twitter, when I led it, and the Twitter of today do not meet any of these principles, Dorsey wrote. Musk, who closed his $44 billion acquisition of Twitter in October, has rolled back many of the old moderation policies. He's also welcomed back former President Trump, who was permanently kicked off the site under Dorsey's leadership after the January 6th selfie fest. Dorsey didn't level any specific criticism at Musk. He said he personally abandoned his efforts to push the company in the right direction after activist firm Elliott Management got involved with the company over 2 years ago. This is my fault alone. I completely gave up pushing for them when an activist entered our stock in 2020. Regarding Twitter's decision to suspend Trump, Dorsey said he believes there was no ill intent or hidden agendas, and everyone acted according to the best information we had at the time. That's a problem, Tim, and we're going to look into that. Still, he said, mistakes were made, and Twitter would be in a better position today if the company focused more on tools for the people using the service rather than tools for us. Dorsey said the general social messaging platform shouldn't take down content or suspend accounts because doing so complicates important context, learning, and enforcement of illegal activity. He promoted the idea of a free and open protocol for social media that isn't owned by any one person or company as the only way to adhere to his stated principles. The problem today is that we have companies who own both the protocol and the discovery, which ultimately puts one person in charge of what's available and seen or not. Dorsey cited Blue Sky, a nonprofit organized by Twitter, as well as Mastodon and Matrix as emerging projects that could potentially live up to his view of what constitutes free and open social media protocol. He said he would be offering grants to promising projects, starting with $1 million to Signal, an encrypted messaging app. So now that Musk has it, now Jack Dorsey wants to make its competitor. I don't know. I'm to the dumpster fire every day. I think that Dorsey is in support of Musk. He really does seem to be. But I do think the activists did get away from him. I really do. And I think that the inmates were running the asylum. So, that is what we have for news. And before we head out on Wednesdays, the last thing that I always do is I take a little bit of time and talk about something that either restores my faith in humanity or something that I am thankful for. And I'm going to come right out and say I am thankful for the move. And I said on Monday already when I started talking about some of the things that are looking up. Now, right now, after having to pay out rent 3 times and then having to run back across the state numerous times, once in a vehicle that got 9 miles to the gallon, because we used the brother-in-law's truck to pull the trailer, that I am still a little bit strapped right now, but I'm looking ahead right now and I'm seeing good things coming off in the future. As I said before, I paid off the identity theft in September, and that boosted my credit to a point where home ownership is not out of reach for me anymore. The prices are still putting it out of reach for me right now, but that's a problem of balancing the markets, not necessarily a problem of my own, well, not even my own doing, but something that's been on my back for the vast majority of my adult life. But even just making the move, I'm already starting to see major improvements off of this. I know a lot of people have probably criticized and seen it, but I was, getting a little bit thin up there for a little bit. But that started to come back off of there. I do think that a part of what was doing that was the hard water in my old apartment. And the town that I lived in, too, by the way, was another thing that went along with that, too. Because, it wasn't just the building that I lived in. I had looked at possibly moving into another building when my lease was up last time. Because I had a disagreement with the owner of the building at the time. But I hadn't planned to move or anything yet at that time. And the owners of that building, while they had ultimately declined my application, did point out that hard water in that town was a problem all across the town. So I think that was part of it, because, I'm starting to feel differently on the top of the head there. So, and I am pushing 40, so, and there is a genetic aspect to it. I've seen it on my mom's side of the family. I've seen it on my dad's side of the family. I understand it's going to come for me one day. But if we can mitigate it for a little bit as we go. But just in general, too. I mean, I've completed now my second, well, I'm a week and a half into my new job, and I mean, I'm only seeing things look up, and I'm already starting to identify some of the problems where I work and changing them. And actually getting a reasonable amount of, hey, yeah, that's actually a good idea. Something I never got at my old job. I'm still a little bit nervous about the fact that I moved, and I know my friend Arvold here, let me actually see if I can get some of the images up here. But my friend Arvold did make some memes that I never wound up sharing just because there was so much going on, and I never got them copied into anything to do, but get the display back up here. But he made a meme under the 47th rule of acquisition. The riskier the road, the greater the profit. And I know that there are some risks right now, especially changing a job in the middle of what's really is a recession and in a position where things could crash. I am the new man on the totem pole. But I think the reward is going to be best. I really do think this is going to work out well for me. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I am being led into slaughter, and it wasn't the Lord that was whispering and giving me opportunity, it was the devil tempting me. And I'll have to pay the consequences for that. But really, realistically right now, what I look at right now is the risk was apt. I'm closer to my parents, as you guys know. I feel more comfortable in the area. I feel more comfortable talking to the people in the area. And I think this is a really good thing. And that's the thing that I'm thankful for. I'm happy for the fact that I did this, even though there was undue stress on me to do so. Yes, as Grant pointed out on Monday when I announced where I was living and how small it was. I am kind of living in the pod right now, unfortunately. But it's a temporary measure to make sure that I can go out and actually, fulfill the American dream of property ownership and doing so. So that's what I'm thankful for. That's what restores my faith in humanity. And with that, I think we're done. We're going to head out of here for the day. Ron, any female prospects yet? I will keep that part of my life to myself. We won't do that on air, but yeah, we'll just keep that one out to myself. But with that, we're going to head out of here. That's an off-air conversation. Where's the outro music? All right, so thank you everybody who came by, chatted, hung out in the live chat, and talked about the news with me. It was a bit of a slow night today, but I know that we're already getting some on the replay. I'm getting comments from some of you guys from the replay already, and I can see where the views are going up, much beyond what we got from the live stream as well. So we're getting there. We'll get a new audience here. We'll see if we can pull some people in from the West Coast and see what's there. If you are on Twitch, stick around and we'll go find somebody to go and raid. We've got nobody on the TSP network that is going to be going tonight, so we won't send anybody there, but we will be back here tomorrow night to go talk about more news, more headlines, and more everything else. So come back and join me here, 6 p.m. Central Time for more news and that. We will see you next time, and make sure that you're still doing great and that you've got your assets protected as well. It's going to get rough for a little while, I think, still, especially with the interest rates going the way they are. But I think you guys are going to be good. I think you guys are going to be up there. You guys are smart enough to go back here and find your news from a place from a guy who's had to make some of the same decisions as you. So I think we're going to be all good. Join us here next time for more Contemporary. We'll see you then. And until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.